Hello, everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast is part of a Peritubular scope series. This audio podcast is part of a Spectre compass. This audio podcast is part of a Brigadier orbit. This audio podcast is part of a Storm Robotics production. In this audio podcast, a little bit around the summary, around theories, coping theories and sort of models or modalities. So it is apparent that coping can be thought of having as two paradigms. There is the psychological stance, and then there is the physiological standpoint. It seems obvious that what happens in one challenge that causes an individual to utilize one coping process or strategy may not necessarily be the same given another threat. It has now become more evident that coping has been viewed from various connotations. There are general limitations to a single sociological model of coping, since there are various paradigms to the human both internally and externally. To understand and appreciate coping in more depth, research needs to highlight the circumstances that cause people to use specific strategies in a given scenario. Such understanding links to how the central nervous system this such understanding should link to how the central nervous system functions. So a little bit in around the sort of additional aspects to this audio podcast. So this review asserts that coping is the foundation behind well-being, and putting forward different theories and models and research where research has neglected that when individuals cope positively or negatively, a particular event could challenge the very basis. Currently, well-being is based on how good an individual is able to sort of rate quality of life or QOL, and so quite transparently, quality of life or QOL calls for a deeper and more intricate understanding because of its sort of fundamentals. Coping is sort of the building block of QOL, of quality of life, and it should not be restricted to the psychology of a being. Simply postulated, when an individual is faced with adversity or trauma, such as a chronic illness, the autonomic nervous system, in association with additional physiological components, is involved. These all come to aid in challenging scenarios. Utilizing a multidisciplinary research effort would prompt healthcare professionals or professionals to unify and achieve a better understanding in psychology, endocrinology, and immunology in order to understand disease tolerance. In order to understand sort of disease tolerance and what processes or strategies can be adopted to enable youngsters to better, or young people to better cope. It is also obvious that apart from psychology, the immune system, endocrine systems, and contribute to how well an individual copes. The psychoneuroimmunology concept, or the PNI concept, can aid to identify and sort of join disciplines to observe coping from broader perspectives. And there are no standard sort of coping models. Specifically, coping itself requires a definition across disciplines and specialties. But excuse me. But again, to affirm that central to health and disease, the nervous system, psychology, endocrine, and immune system must and generally intertwine. The foundation behind a good well-being and quality of life is coping, not just that in bad times, but in good ones as well. where the well-being health and nursing specialty and health nursing specialty is concerned. This narrative review works informs that caring for patients requires a holistic approach, and encouraging patients to build on coping processes is an important foundation of various elements in around disease. Well-being nursing practice and theory has evolved to embrace sort of main notions such as recovery and a focus on normative well-being, in contrast to disease in contrast to disease-based approaches of the past or retrospectively. And so knowledge of the processes and mechanisms around of coping is therefore essential to accommodate and facilitate well-being and nursing in around well-being, health and sort of health health sort of models or theories that incorporate progressive approaches to healthcare, where normalization is a central is a central tenet. That draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast as part of a Peritubular scope series. This audio podcast as part of a sort of an educational sort of research audio podcast series. This audio podcast as part of a Spectre sort of compass. This audio podcast as part of a Brigadier orbit, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Robotics production.